International investigators have named 4 suspects over the shooting down of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine nearly 5 years ago. They will face murder charges in a trial set to start next March in the Netherlands.
Igor Girkin, Sergei Dubinsky, Oleg Pulatov and Leonid Kharchenko.
3 of the suspects are Russian. The 4th is Ukrainian. International arrest warrants will be issued and the 4 men placed on global wanted lists. MH17 was en route to Kuala Lumpur when it was hit on the 17th of July 2014 over territory in eastern Ukraine, held by pro-Russian separatists. All 298 people on board were killed. A minute ago is in Kuala Lumpur and Dan Ashby is in Russia, and they both join us tonight for more on this story. Dan, we'll come to you first. Tell us more about the suspects.
Well, interestingly, all 3 of the Russian suspects were linked to Russian security services, either serving at the moment or have served before. And in particular, the GRU, that's Russia's foreign security service, was mentioned. It's the one that was mentioned a lot of times when it came to the UK Salisbury poisoning. So it's becoming a rather infamous unit. And the allegations against these men is that they were part of the 53rd Brigade, a Russian military unit that moved in the missile system into eastern Ukraine, helped to organize it. But interestingly, they are not making direct accusations that the men pushed the buttons to fire the missile at MH17. What the Dutch investigators are saying, though, is that under Dutch law, the very fact of organising the arrival of this missile system is enough to count towards a charge of murder. They are charging all 3 of these Russian men and the 1 Ukrainian with not just causing the MH17 crash, but also murdering all 298 people on board by doing that. So they say they are not accusing them of pressing the button, but they will be seeking to interview those men. As you say, they're not seeking to extradite them because of the Russian constitution, but they do want to investigate them further, and they will be put on trial whether or not the men appear at court.
So Dan, if they're not able to extradite them, what happens next?
Well, we believe there will be a trial next year, and as I say, they are intending to go ahead with it because I think the way the Dutch investigators see this is that justice needs to be served, and these 4 men are innocent until proven guilty. So this is just the fact of laying the charges. They will go ahead with their trial. They say they are appealing to Russia to allow them to interview these men, if not for Russia to interview these men. And of course, they've invited the suspects to be part of the trial. But already in the last 30 minutes, we've seen on Russian state media 2 of the suspects coming forward claiming they're innocent, saying they will not be part of this trial, and that would fit right in with Russia's narrative of this event, which is that Russia had nothing to do with it and it's being unfairly accused. There was a huge Russian military press conference last year where Russia effectively said, look, this missile system was already in Ukraine. We didn't bring it into Ukraine. It was a Soviet-era missile system that had been there all along, effectively casting aspersions onto Ukraine rather than Russia. So there is very little chance of these men appearing at trial, but according to the Dutch investigators, if a trial can be held, then that will help justice.
Thanks very much for that, Dan. Let's cross over now to Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur for some reaction from the Malaysian side of things. Mel, you've spoken to some families who lost their loved ones on MH17. What is it that they want?
Well, I met the lawyer, Mr. Balan Nair, who is representing family members of 8 crew members on board MH17. Now, there were altogether 15 crew members, and he represents about 8 of them. And the family members have been waiting for almost 5 years for this day to come. It's been a long wait. They had taken the flag carrier, Malaysia Airlines, to court, and in the end, they settled outside court. Now, the compensation, he said, is never enough. They want the perpetrators to be brought to justice, not just those who moved the Buk missile, who pressed a button that executed orders, but also those at the higher chain of command, the Russian government and President Putin himself. They said should be held responsible. They hope that the Malaysian government will support them, will back them up. The lawyer, Mr. Nair, said the family members have already initiated their case at the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, but Russian side has not responded. With the information released today by the Joint Investigation Team, as well as the criminal indictment, the charges against the 4 suspects, including 3 Russians, the families hope that the class action that mounted against Russian government will succeed eventually. It's still a long way to go. It's still a long way off. Dutch court will start hearing, I was told, in March next year. But this has certainly given much hope to the family members of the victims and bring them one step closer, perhaps to finding closure at last. Now, let's hear it from the lawyer, Mr. Nair himself, earlier.
It's never been about money. For them, they just want to bring those perpetrators to justice, and hopefully the criminal indictment should possibly give some closure to the family members. So support from the Malaysian government will be very good for the family members, because they will at least know that they are being backed up by their own government.
Now, Mr. Nair said a legal committee has already been formed together with lawyers in the US, UK, Germany, and they have given Russian government till September 3rd, he said, to respond, and failing which they will pursue their action further in the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. Of the 298 on board MH17, 43 are Malaysians, and remains to be seen what Malaysian government or the Attorney General's office is going to respond after this.
All right, many thanks for that update. Minutes ago in Kuala Lumpur, and Dan Ashby speaking to us from Moscow.
MH17 crashed during the thick of the war in eastern Ukraine and forced authorities to impose a flight ban over the area. In fact, most airspace in the area remains off limits to civilian air traffic.
It was to be a routine flight from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, but this was where passengers of flight MH17 ended up, in the fields around the village of Grabov in eastern Ukraine, after their plane was shot down on July 17, 2014. There were 298 people on board. Nobody survived, among them 80 children. The majority of the victims were Dutch, the rest a mix that included Malaysians, Indonesians and Australians.
On the 23rd of June 2014, a convoy of the 53rd Brigade left the base in a southerly direction.
Today's announcement comes nearly a year after investigators said the Buk missile, which hit the plane, originated from a Russian military brigade. They say a number of missile systems were brought in from Russia to support rebels in eastern Ukraine, and identified 7 unique features, including a military number on one of the launchers. Last year, the Netherlands and Australia said they formally held Russia responsible for the disaster. But Russia insists MH17 was fired on by Ukrainian forces during the thick of the country's civil war. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called the downing of MH17 a terrible tragedy, but he maintains Moscow had nothing to do with it.